Hello and welcome to another training video. Now today we're going to be taking a look at the relatively new let function in Excel. Now there's a lot of videos out there at the moment explaining how to use this, and some of them are quite complicated and not really that helpful for someone who may be exposed to it for the first time. Lots of people are also running around looking for reasons to use the let function, and I would say before you do that, just be slightly cautious and maybe think, if Microsoft had just released the HLOOKUP function, would you be converting your spreadsheets all into horizontal layout so you could use the HLOOKUP function? Probably not. And the same may well apply to you regarding the let function. It might not be suitable for some of the things that you're going to do. So where is it useful? Well, if you use nested functions, if you use helper cells, it can be used to replace some of them. And this is the example that I'm going to use here. So I'm going to first of all delete the let function I had in there. I'm going to show you an example of this using helper cells, and then I'll show you an example using nested functions. And then we'll do the same thing with a let. And you can decide which one would suit the way you do business best. Now here we have an array or a table of rates that people are charged, and this is a named range called rate table. Here we have a different list of products that we could rent to people, and this is a named range called equipment list. And here we have different types of customer, and this is called rate list. Now here I have some drop down menus where we can choose what categories of item and customer we have. Now if we're doing this with helper cells, what we do is we do a match to try and find what row and column the different categories fell into, and we then use an index to work out what higher cost they would pay. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's first of all do the match to find what row number it is. So here in my helper cell, I'm just going to say equals match. Now what do I want to match? I want to match whatever people have chosen from the drop down. Where do I want to match it? Well, I want to match it from my equipment list. And you must remember to say you want an exact match. So I've done the equals 0 at the end there. Now that tells me that the item that's been chosen currently is in row 3 within my array. And if I change that, you'll see it is dynamic and it does update instantly. I change the formula. That's provided you have your calculations turned to automatic. If you have them turned to manual, this will not update. Okay, let's do the same for the next one. So here we want to work out what column we're in, so which of these columns does the customer fall into. And again, this is going to be a match. So it's a match. We're looking up that item there from our rate list this time. And again, don't forget the exact match at the end. And again now, if this changes, the number itself will update. Private customers are in column 3, so they'll be paying something from that list there. And because they've chosen that item, the 515, they will be going from that row there. So we'd be looking for an 8250 for this particular customer. Now how we use that is we then use that in an index. So here's my index. What is it I want to index? Well, I want to index something within my rate table, and it now asks me for my row number. Now rather than me doing the match here, we simply refer to our helper cell that already has the row number in it. If I then want to get my column number, I again refer to the helper cell that has the column number in it. And that gives me my 8250. And of course this is dynamic again, so as I change the items or the type of customer, then my index, my higher cost per day, will update. But sometimes what you don't want is you don't want this showing on the sheet. So the other thing that we do is we nest those matches inside the index. Now if you see here, I've referred to cell F12. Now actually what I mean is the answer to the formula that's in F12. Now another way I can do this is I can take that formula out. So I've selected everything from there but not the equals, and I copy it, and now when I go back into my index, instead of referring to F12, I can paste in the whole function. And I can do the same for F13. So again, I select everything but not the equals. I copy it and I go into my index, and now where I referred to F13, I simply paste in the formula that was there. Now you'll notice this still works, but the clever bit is I no longer need my helper cells anymore. They're not there, I've just deleted them completely. This will still work and it will still update because the whole of the formula is nested inside that cell. Now that's effectively what the let function does, but it's, for some people it's much easier and cleaner to read than this whole function. So let's have a look at how the let works, and I'm going to just pop that down so we've got more space because I find it easier to lay out the let function as I'm doing it. So I'm going to start off with equals let tab to accept, and then I do Alt Enter to put my first argument on the next line. Now my first argument here is a variable name, so it's asking me for a variable that I want to use, effectively the answer to a nested function which I would have used in the previous. Now the previous nested function, the first one I found, was my row, so I'm going to call this variable R for row, and I then press comma. Now what I've done is I've moved on to how do I define the value of that variable, and if you remember this was a match, so I matched the item there with the item list there, and again don't forget the exact match type, so it's an exact match, and I'm going to close the bracket here and I'm going to do Alt Enter to move to a new line because I've finished defining that first variable. So the first variable is my match, it's the answer to the match. My second variable is going to be my columns, and this is another match, and this is the match for that there within that list, and again don't forget the comma 0, and for some reason that's put in a comma 1 above, and I can see that now, so I'm going to make sure I change that to a 0. I do want an exact match. Now again I close the bracket there, Alt Enter to move to a new line. Now if you're following along here, sorry, I need a comma there as well, so I need to remember the comma, otherwise it's not going to move me to the right part of the calculation here. So that comma there is after defining the match, and that comma there is after defining the match here. So now if we have a look down here, what it's asking me for is named 3, so I could be starting to define more variables, third, fourth, fifth and so on, or I could be doing the calculation. So this is where we're going to do our calculation, and in this case we're going to do the index. So index, and it asks me for the array, and my array is the rate table, which is the whole of this here. And what does it ask me for next? Well, the row number. Now the row number is what I've already defined up here as R, so I just refer to it as R, comma C, that's my column which I've referred to here. Now I need to close the bracket. This is closing the bracket for the index, and I'm going to do Control Enter again, Alt Enter, sorry, and now I close the bracket again, that's closing the bracket for the let. When I press Enter, it gives me the answer. Now effectively it is just a nested function, it's a way of nesting things so that it's easy to understand what's happening. For me, that's actually much cleaner than a standard nested function, and on the worksheet it's certainly cleaner than having helper cells. But as I say, it's not for everybody. It is great, it's dynamic, it works, it updates, it gives me the answer, it's fairly quick. This is not the most efficient way of using it. The most efficient way would be where I had to refer to the same thing multiple times within my function. So if I had maybe not an index, but the index was something that referred to my rows, and then something else referred to the rows, then something else referred to the rows, this would certainly be much better way of doing it, because I only define my rows once and I don't have to have the match C12 equipment list multiple times in order to get the rows. Okay, well that's a very quick overview of the let function, what it can replace. So it can replace nested functions or using helper cells. Like I say, there's much more to it than that, but for simple understanding, I hope that's been useful, and as always, thank you for listening.